Hello and welcome to the Authority of Love. It's a Family Foundation Friday with our great co-host David Walls of the Family Foundation. I'm your host Greg Williams, and we'd like to welcome you, however you're listening or viewing. Thanks for joining us, David. Thanks for joining us again.
It's good to be with you.
Yeah, this has always been a highlight of my week, one of a couple of highlights of my week.
Yes.
And so even when the news is not all good,
yes,
I'm glad we get the opportunity to share it.
Yeah.
And I do want to thank all those I've asked the last 2 or 3 weeks for people to be praying for the opportunity that I had to share for the Protect Child Health Coalition in American Family Association in Mississippi, and it went really well. So I appreciate it. I know the prayers were answered and
awesome.
Went great. And as a matter of fact, I haven't said this to you, but I'd like to, along with what we do now with Kentucky's Voice, we do some of that. I've got a lineup of people now that I love to doing some of these things around the country and even around the world to help us understand more about what's really going on, because they're doing some tremendous work like you are doing here in Kentucky. So appreciate that. What have you got going on, man, this nearing Thanksgiving?
Greg, I'm just thankful it's warmed up a little bit. I don't know about you, but I was not ready for snow yet. That was not on my.
We went from summer to winter like in 2 days.
That was not on my bingo card for this week. So
yeah. Welcome to Kentucky.
Yeah,
right. You don't get that hardly ever. In Texas, I know we've talked about that before, but interestingly enough, that was literally. I mean, we went from 70s to 30s. In like 2 days.
Yeah.
Crazy, but welcome to Kentucky, as we say. We've got a lot to cover, and we're probably going to be covering it for a while, David. So I know that we talked last week about the Kentucky Baptist Convention because they're bringing some strong things to light. What has happened with that?
Yeah, no, excited to report that all the different important resolutions that they were putting before the messengers, which again, represents Kentucky Baptists and the thousands of SBC churches here in Kentucky. All of those passed. So what does that mean? So that means there were a couple of resolutions related to issues that are in front of and have been in front of the Kentucky General Assembly. Specifically, they passed a resolution calling for the General Assembly to pass a medical conscience bill, which is something we have advocated for many sessions. There was also the resolution calling for the General Assembly to repeal or give an exemption to churches so they are no longer impacted by the sales and use tax that is negatively impacting churches in their ministries and their ability to just do the ministry work that they've been called to do, free from government interference. So look, I'm incredibly thankful and encouraged to say that we've got the KBC essentially, and it's not the KBC, it's the churches and the individual churches within that saying, we're going to join even more so in calling to get these important pieces of legislation passed. They also passed the resolutions essentially calling for both at the state and federal level to say we have got to move towards a legal regime where we eradicate pornography.
Yes.
So incredibly thankful for that. And then also a very strong resolution on marriage, family, and life.
I love that one.
Absolutely.
And that's foundational to all the others,
Absolutely.
really. It truly is.
Absolutely.
So I love to hear that. And you mentioned not just the convention, but all the independent churches. And I appreciate the autonomy and the independence. But I also would pray, and I know you would as well, that each of those pastors would take to heart and say, we're going to stand up for these things that are truly in line with God's word.
Absolutely.
Giving us the right freedoms and the rights and getting, government is supposed to reward that which is good and punish that which is evil.
Right.
And that's based on God's word.
Absolutely.
So hoping and praying they'll do that. Got some other things going on. I know that SCOTUS, we had one that we were praying for, a huge case that we hoped would get there, and it did. And I say they kicked the can down the road, and I hope it's not too far down the road. But enlighten us on our own, Kentucky's own Kim Davis situation.
Yeah, disappointed, ultimately probably not surprised, but very disappointed that the Supreme Court did not decide to take up her case and a challenge to Obergefell. Let's not forget the situation here. In 2015, just over 10 years ago, out of thin air, the United States Supreme Court invented a so-called right mandated all states to recognize a so-called same-sex marriage. Kim Davis was one, but there were others. But her most prominently, she literally ended up being thrown in jail because she didn't want to have to violate her religious beliefs and sign marriage license for what is ultimately not marriage.
Right.
And
Exactly
so,
right.
so her, legal challenge has been playing out over many years. She now has had this homosexual couple was very clear has specifically gone after her, even though they were able to eventually get a marriage license. They continued to sue and go after her.
Over $350,000,
right?
That they were supposed.
So let's not forget that one of the takeaways from the Supreme Court not hearing this case is the injustice that Kim Davis has experienced is probably going to stay that way. But even bigger than one person, as we have continued to call for, there has to be a reckoning on the Obergefell decision. There's really just there's no path forward. Obviously, Kim Davis's situation continues to highlight the collision with religious liberty.
Yes.
That we have, those that pointed to this have been prophetic. We continue to have religious liberty collisions because when you have a government step in and say, we're going to mandate and recognize something that is in direct violation of God's word, that is inevitably going to continue to lead to that.
That's right.
But, and this is where something, too, our friend Katie Faust with Them Before Us and their ministry. We had someone from their team speak at our family forum earlier this year. They have continued to really point, and I heard some of the comments that Katie had going on Washington Watch with Tony Perkins this week saying, look, we also need to remember that ultimately what the Supreme Court did in 2015 in the Obergefell decision is set in motion a process to strip children of their right to have a mother and father.
She said it beautifully.
And that is so true. And what we have seen since then is that in states across the country, and even to some extent in the federal government, we are seeing mothers and fathers being stripped away and really challenging parenthood status because, again, what's the purpose of government recognizing marriage? Well, I would say one is it's important to recognize truth, but second to that, in terms of the policy standpoint, it's incredibly important as a society to do everything we can in the legal arena to attach children to their mother and father.
Yes.
And when you sanction a regime that says marriage is no longer dependent upon a mother and father coming together, you have created an environment in which it calls into question all of the family law that we have understood.
Exactly right.
And so we're in an environment now, whether you're talking about the continued concerns about IVF and in just so many ways in which we're creating an environment that says the law as it relates to family code is no longer about protecting children and doing all that we can to ensure a child is attached to their actual biological mother and father to the extent that we can, to say, no, all of family law is about going after the wants and needs of parents and their desires and their adults with no thought whatsoever to what the ramifications are to children.
And David, on both ends, the part of what I spoke about this past weekend at American Family Association was literally that. Several studies just in the last 2 or 3 years, once again, confirming what we have known for 50 years in the studies, that children do best by far. It's not even close when they are with their biological mother and father. Second, adopted children with a mother and a father. Those are the two, and there's not even a close third. And yet we still continue to push this. It not only harms the family itself, but as you've been saying, the children are hurt every time. And they just want to ignore that. The science and everything. So that's really sad. I think it also points to something else we heard, which was very positive this week coming out of your home state and the Fifth Circuit Court.
So, out of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is based in New Orleans, they upheld Texas's right to put their law that bans sexually explicit performances, aka including drag shows, with protecting children. To ensure that children are protected from those things. That law they had passed, I believe, 2 years ago. It had been immediately challenged in court and had been put on hold, essentially an injunction in place against the enforcement of that law. The Fifth Circuit has now said no, that law is going to remain in effect. A legal challenge will continue to play out, but
Sure,
that's an
sure.
encouraging
Absolutely.
sign. And there was some really strong language from one of the judges on the Fifth Circuit, and I don't have the quote directly in front of me, Greg, but it was something to the point of, because the other side has said, oh, well, this is a First Amendment issue.
Yeah.
And the judge kind of calls into question, I'm not quite so sure that the right to put on, prosthetic breast and to dance around in scantily clad clothes in a way that is incredibly provocative and sexual in front of children is what the founders were seeking to protect in the First Amendment. I'm paraphrasing here, but it was a very strong point taken. So here's the connection to Kentucky. To remind folks, is there has been similar legislation filed here in Kentucky in the past, and not this last year, but in, I believe, the session before that, it actually passed in the Senate. Our good friend, State Senator Lindsey Tishner, has been a champion of this issue. And so that legislation has passed the Senate in the past, but it has faced an uphill battle and is not being considered in our House.
Yeah.
And so we continue to have these issues here in Kentucky. I mean, there was just prominently a drag show related to WKU University that we talked about, I believe, earlier this year, where the pictures there were young children who were essentially participated in this and
encouraged
obviously
to participate.
were present in it. Something that should not happen, and obviously our tax dollars should have absolutely no part in this. So hopefully this is an encouragement and a reminder, a challenge to the General Assembly that now's the time to get this done in Kentucky.
Well, here's the other thing. Not only is it directly connected to Kentucky, but there's a direct connection back to what we just talked about, to Obergefell.
Yes.
The prophetic voices are getting louder and louder in saying that this is not just what you wanted. You wanted to destroy all of this simply for adults' desires,
right,
for their feelings or whatever else. Do we need to be compassionate? Yes, but not apart from truth and even the science that so readily discounts all of this.
Right.
And we've got to stand strong, and we're praying that happens here in Kentucky and around this country.
And why is the other side so dead set on opposing any effort to simply protect children from these things? Right? Because ultimately, they're the target.
That's what I was going to say, David.
This is ultimately all of this agenda is about winning over
the younger you can get them,
the hearts and minds of the next generation. So
the brain research shows that.
Yeah.
The younger you are, even up to into your teen years, the more malleable the brain is, and if you can imprint it then, it's much harder to get rid of.
Yeah.
They know that. They know that science.
You desensitize children to these things at young ages.
Absolutely.
I mean, look, I have 3 young kids. If you want to introduce ideas into children, simply just simple exposure of seeing things is going to cause children to start down a path.
Yeah. Curiosity is going to be piqued.
Absolutely.
And then you move on, and they know that. So we've got to do, again, I'll go back to my statement earlier.
Yeah.
Government rewards that which is good and punishes that which is evil. And this is evil.
Yep.
All of this is. David, we got a whole lot more to discuss. That's going to be coming up over the next few months into the General Assembly and into our state and our culture. So we need to continue to keep those in mind and ask you to continue to pray for that. If you got thoughts or comments or questions, contact us, info@kentuckyfamily.org or loveandlordship@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for your prayers. Thanks always to the Lord. Make it a great day, and God bless in Christ. I'm your host, Greg Williams, with co-host David Walls, and you're listening to Family